a little bit about Earl and his accomplishments with the guy that used to run this building, Ben Cagle. He's Ben's standing right over there. Look at Ben in there. He's got a camera and he's. Hi, Ben. So Ben's going to be talking a little bit about the influences that Earl's had on many of us over the years as we celebrate his remarkable story. All right.
Earl's a great guy. I had a chance to meet him a few times.
Earl's the best. Decatur hits 92. Cleveland, Dalton, Lafayette, Bridgeport at 93. 94 to 95 here in and around the downtown area. Scattered shower chances again in the forecast, but they do remain extremely low.
Coming up next, we'll be celebrating a local broadcasting legend.
We certainly is. Earl Freudenberg hanging up the headphones after more than 50 years. We'll talk with one of his longtime friends about his accomplishments next.
All right.
You rolling now?
Rolling.
All right.
Help yourself there. One of those donuts. They're low calorie. They told me they were.
Low calorie,
I
no
told them
fat,
be sure
right?
and squeeze all those calories out. They said, hey, we'll take care of that. You didn't think I was going to be late, did you, Chip?
No. I knew better than that. I knew better than that. And pop that off of prompter, please. Lynn's cap.
Yeah. I thought I'd take it off the thing there.
Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
10 seconds.
All right, I got it.
You're watching News 12 this morning. Your news now.
Welcome back. It's 6:13. It is Friday morning, and it's not often somebody stays at a job for more than 50 years, and it's even rarer than when that individual has such a tremendous impact on the Tennessee Valley area. Earl Freudenberg is stepping aside after almost 55 years, and his longtime friend Ben Cagle is here.
Good to see you, Jim.
To talk about Earl. It's good to see you as well, Ben. If you had to sum up Earl in 20 seconds, how would you do it?
20 seconds. I'd say he's one of the most honorable men that I've ever met in my entire life. He's an incredible human being. He's loved by everyone. He's a marvelous person.
He really
he
is.
He loves people, and he loves the community more than most people realize. He loves to do things for people. He's always been that way. We go back to high school. I know him. I've known Earl for 53 years. My goodness.
And he's been on the air here, and he and Luther were longtime pals, longtime workmates, longtime colleagues. And it's not often you see somebody who has achieved the kind of status that Earl has done.
Yeah, exactly. He's a caring person, and people said, well, has he always been that way?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize Earl got tutoring early on from Luther.
Right. He got schooled by
Luther. Luther was there from the start. Luther knew Earl's parents very well. They were very good friends. And Earl's named after Luther. His name,
yes.
Earl's name is Luther Earl Freudenberg. So that relationship with Luther Massengill goes way, way back.
We got to honor Earl Freudenberg last year at the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. He was inducted into that, and I think we have a little bit of video from this, and he was certainly honored.
He was.
Good to see him up there getting his due accolades from fellow broadcasters all across the country.
Well deserved. I was so thrilled to be there that night and witness that, and his family, Julie. Oh my goodness, Julie was thrilled to that, and the whole family.
If you had to sum up the influence Earl has had in your life in one word, what would it be?
In one word?
Yeah.
Earl!
We decided we were going to pull a surprise.
Oh my goodness, good to see you.
Earl, have a seat, and we're going to talk to you for just a few seconds as you wrap up the last.
Let me get out of the way.
No, you sit.
You know what the neat thing is? We were on stage walking across the Memorial Auditorium stage 51 years ago getting a high school diploma. That was the first day I was hired at WDOD. The last day of my career, we're on stage again.
So what's ahead? You know, you've been getting up at
Sleeping till 4:30 or 5. I have to get up at 5 so I can watch Chip Chapman.
He has been such a vital, integral part of the community, and for young pups like us, or like me anyway, both you guys played a big part in my broadcast history. And
I did?
You did?
I
See,
did?
That's one of the things, and Ben and I were talking about this. You have no idea the number of people that you have influenced in a positive way over the years.
It's
Is
been
that-
fun.
Is that accurate, Ben?
It's been fun.
Absolutely.
It's been fun.
So 55 years behind the microphone, waking up the Tennessee Valley area now, and you're going to turn this over to someone else. Today is actually your final day on the
My
air.
last day on the air, right?
Any thoughts about retiring? Any second thoughts about it?
No, I'm ready. It's my time. Nearly 69 years old, and it's time to let some of the younger people come in and do the job that we've been doing.
You never get out of it though, you know.
No, I'm
never-
still
it's-
going to have a program
it's always-
on Sunday mornings from
It's
7
always
to
there.
9.
It's all you
gets
never-
out of you.
Never. You know, when I walked in the front door this morning, I'm like, wow, just memories
Yep.
everywhere. You never totally get out of
No,
it.
no.
Well, Ben, I owe you an apology because Earl and I sort of concocted this at the last minute, as in last
You pulled
night.
a good one
So
off, yeah.
I know that he is one of your longtime best friends, and we wanted you.
I'm honored.
to
I'm
be
honored to
together
know
here.
Earl and his entire family. They're wonderful people. I love them dearly. But yeah, it's
Ben's
Earl's
got
another
a
guy.
special webpage, Chattanooga Ben, and I'm an appendix to that. The Hey Earl page, and he's put 25 or 30 of my different
Things.
whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
Interview with Johnny Mann, Ray Peterson, a copy of the old Armed Forces Day Parade, some about the Forgotten Child Fund that
Yeah.
we were involved in.
It's
He's
amazing.
done all that. That's an appendix to Chattanooga Ben.
You've got a bunch of listeners who are waiting on you to begin your final broadcast day over at WDYN,
Yeah.
and we're going to have to wrap it up here. I can sit here and talk to these guys.
And for all the cops on Rossville Boulevard,
Get out of the way.
get out of the way.
Ben Cagle, thank you so much.
Real
I
pleasure.
appreciate it. It's always fun to see you.
buddy.
Earl, congratulations
Thank
on
you,
a
Chip.
career well
Thanks
done.
both of you for all your help down through the years.
We're back with more of News 12 this morning after this.
You pulled one on me on that one.
You know what? You see these two shirts? We went shopping one day together.
Did you really?
Yeah, he says they got these things on sale.
I said, Earl, you gotta go check out this place, and it's really great shirt.
Yeah.
And the Joseph Banks.
Yeah.
And they were on sale, and Earl said, really, that's a good looking shirt. So we went over, we go through Joseph Banks, and I'm pulling out shirts. And hey Earl, you look good in this one.
Yeah, this is so I wore my shirt.
And the guys at Joseph Banks are going like, okay. So, but that's not the end of the story. So later on, his wife said, you got Earl to go shopping? You got to be joking. You
Well, let's
got Earl to go
hold
shopping?
it, hold it, guys. They're going to come out and unwire you. De-wire you.
Oh, okay.
Or I guess I could help with that. So hold still, Ben, because that thing is in your pocket. or-
Ben knows all
Right.
about this stuff.
I don't know. I don't know how much I know. What's that?
You know the best thing about this job, Ben,
What?
is the fact that I got a portalet right here, and I make good use of this every morning.
Well, here we are getting set up for Earl's last day of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. He needs a break. After 53 years, he needs a break. Did you got the coffee pot going, Earl?
No.
No coffee?
I had that time. What are you talking about?
I came down here hoping you were going to have some coffee made. Do you have coffee? No. Here, I got donuts out. I got a dozen donuts out there, and you didn't even get the coffee going. I don't know.
You're worse than Curtis Adams. Oh, that's my Hissongs. My good friends, the Hissongs, and they're from Rockport, Maine. Good morning, sunrise, and it's 9 minutes after 7 in the traffic center. Here's Mike Wood.
Talked a little bit ago, Earl, about a cargo fire in Marion County on 24 eastbound, right at the 149 right there at South Pittsburgh. Fully involved, pretty significant fire apparently, but they being PHP, just opened a lane in the last couple of minutes, so they did have everything shut down, but it looks like the lane is now open there, Earl. Significant backup there because of that this morning. Chattanooga police on scene now on Bonnie Oaks Drive at Volkswagen Drive with an accident, no injuries, but as we said, Chattanooga police there. Everything else seems to be in pretty good shape so far. 75-24 still looking pretty light up and down the bridge cut. Looks like that is in pretty good shape as well. We'll keep you updated here through the morning. Mike Wood in the traffic center. And of course, hey Earl, that's Sunrise, WDYN.
All right, thank you so much, Mike Wood. 11 minutes after 7 o'clock. Well, how do you begin to start to wrap up a career? A career where that I guess I've done just about everything that I wanted to. I can't think of anything that I haven't done in broadcasting that I didn't want to do. Everything that I've done, I've wanted to do. And one person that I have known for the entire time is the guy that's sitting here with me right now, Ben Cagle. Ben and I walked across the stage together in 1965 at the Memorial Auditorium on our graduation day, and that was the same day that I was hired. Ernie Feggins hired me at WDOD, and now Ben is here with me this morning on this final day of our full-time career. And Ben, thank you for getting up. We went down to Channel 12 and I saw you surprised this morning.
Yeah, you pulled a good one on me. Chip Chapman at Channel 12 called and come on down here. We want to talk about Earl. He said, "Can you get up that early? You've been retired for a long time." I said, "Yeah, I can." Chip, I came from the Luther Massengill Harry Thornton School of Always Be on Time. And so he grinned, and yeah, that was a big surprise when you came out there.
And you were there. He told me, he says, "Now, you sit out in your car." He says, Ben, Ben used to be the star salesman at Channel 12 and was the radio station manager for several years. So he wanted to walk around and see what
he
they'd
knew.
done.
He knew that I could not go in that station
And not
just
prowl,
kind of prowl around.
Yeah,
He knew.
Yeah, so he told me, he says, "Now you sit out in the car and I will send somebody out there to get you to come in." Well, we've been through it all together. We worked at WDOD together. We worked at Channel 12 and WDEF. You made it to the big times, though, because you got all the headaches of owning your own radio station for a while.
Yeah, headaches for sure. But like you, we've had fun. It's been a fun career for me, and I know it's been great for you, and that's what it's all about. And you've done an outstanding job. Earl, you are loved by this town on a scale that you probably don't even understand. And I want you to know that. You know that. You have to know that.
Yeah, and if I didn't know that, I found that out this year, because after you guys put me in the Hall of Fame, all of those nice comments on Facebook, and then when we announced our retirement, why, I've been hearing from friends. I did not know that Jack Hatcher, who passed away yesterday, I didn't know that he worked at AFN in Munich. I did not know that, and I have known Jack for,
I had no idea.
I did not know that, but the obituary has him at AFN in Munich. Well, my program was heard over AFN in Munich for a couple of years there when I was there in the
Jack
early 70s.
Hatcher, he was one of a kind.
Yeah.
He's going to be missed.
Oh, he's going to be missed. Jack was a lot of fun. Down at Channel 12 Studios, they've got the old break room down in the basement, and that used to be where the coffee is. Well, Jack would run down there in between records, and he would get him a cup of coffee, and he took giant steps, and he would go down the hall, and the coffee would spill out, and when he got back to the studio, why, most of the coffee would be on the carpet. That would aggravate Luther to pieces. Luther would go out there with tough stuff and all of his cleaner. Oh, it just drove him crazy to have to go out there and clean up all those coffee stains after Jack.
And Luther was, it had to be cleaned up. If Luther saw coffee on the carpet, okay, where's the cleaner? Where's the rags? Look at what Jack Hatcher did again.
Yeah. I never will forget that.
Why did he take those big steps?
I don't know. They were. I mean, nobody. I know of nobody that took as big as steps as Jack Hatcher.
And he had mannerisms that were like no one else, because he would look, if you jumped on him or whatever, he would go, "Willow, sorry about that."
That's true. That's
sorry.
true.
I'm sorry about that, Luther.
And he lived up on Morrison Springs Road. Well, one morning I was going somewhere, and he was on Dayton Boulevard, and he was walking, and I stopped, and I said, "Jack, need a ride?" He says, "No, I got to get my exercise. I'm walking to work." I said, you're headed to 3300 South Broad Street? He says, I'll be there in time for my noon program. but he was getting his exercise by walking. There'll never be another Jack Hatcher. Well, I want to take us back now. What year did you do the Cal Newton video down at Parkway Baptist Church? Was that
Earl,
2010?
that
2011?
sounds about right. 10 or 11, somewhere in through there. Yeah.
You did that for the Walker County, Catoosa County Stocking Full of Love. And it was a who's who of piano players there that night.
Never will forget that. That was an amazing evening. Yeah.
That was sort of the beginning of your little hobby of doing videos for first one thing and another
yeah,
to preserve history.
I've been doing it for about a year before that, not to a large degree. I enjoy doing video. You know, you retire, you have to have something else, and that's something I've always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I had time for it. You know, people, you don't want to sit around when you retire. You'll find something. There will be, you know, maybe you won't be completely out of radio. Something will come along. But that's one thing that I've always enjoyed doing, and it makes me feel good when I'll edit some videos and to have some young kids come up to me and want to know, how did you do that? How did you do that? And that makes me feel like, well, I'm not quite over the hill yet. Got a drone with a camera here not long ago, and I'm flying that thing all around town. And,
oh, you recently did a video on Chattanooga, a 2-minute video, 3-minute video.
I love
Man,
it.
that was
fun.
great.
And to have these young kids come up and say, well, how did you get that shot? Can you do this? Can you do that? And it makes you feel good. But I love it. I love it.
Well, down at Parkway Baptist Church that evening was a host of piano players, and one of them was the man that has meant so much to me, the late Dickie Matthews. And we got a clip from Ben Cagle's video we want to play for you.
I was lucky to be there.
Earl, are you ready to quit? Gosh. Whoa.
How you doing, bro?
TV personality. How
Good
you
to
doing?
see you, man. Curtis
By the way, that company was started the same year I was born.
Really?
Yeah.
What company was it?
Huh?
What company is that?
He advertises. He's
Oh.
on there all the time.
Oh, Gentry Chevrolet.
Yeah, Gentry Chevrolet, yeah.
He does a lot of advertising.
1932.
How many times out on every day?
The Gentry thing,
Huh?
the Gentry Chevrolet,
Yeah.
it's on there a lot.
Yeah.
Well, this is Hey Earl with you here on Sunrise, our last broadcast, and coming up in just a few minutes, why, we're going to meet our good friend, Commissioner Curtis Adams. He's been my friend for many, many years, and we've had so much fun together down through the years, and we'll be reminiscing next half hour about some of those good times. Stay with us.
I'm Johnny Emerson Talbot, and I love.
Hey, Earl would call me during the week. There'd be something real hot and nasty. Politics. He called when we come on Sunday.
Yes.
I go down there in 2 hours they did on my butt.
And I guess that's why God actually
On Sunday morning. Nasty.
And he'd sit there at the end of the program, he'd say, now when you want me to come back, just call me.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have a face.
Well, see, he never dodged.
Oh,
he
he
was
never-
always straightforward
He
with the
never
public.
dodged anybody.
Always
He sure did.
straightforward, and you didn't get that. You had these other guys, man, they'd run. They'd see
That's
that
right.
microphone, they'd go out the back door.
That's right.
You confronted the microphone and said, hey, this is who I am, this is what I am, let's talk. And the others didn't do that.
No.
You're the only one,
Earl would only call me when it was real hot. Something
Yeah.
real hot.
but you're the...
That was about once a month.
And I go down there and
Mike Wood, the traffic center. Sunrise, good morning. Hey, Earl, WD.
Well, there have been a lot of people who have helped me down through the years, and if I start naming names, well, I certainly leave somebody out. I told you about my good friend Dickie Matthews, all the doors that Dickie has opened to gospel music, introducing me to people and that Dickie means the world. But there's a lot of people in political circles that mean so much to me. I really had a good relation with Commissioner Ben Miller and his wife Lou, and of course Bill Hollander, Bill Knowles, and Bill Bennett, Carl Levi. It just goes on and on and on and on, all these people that have helped me. But one person that is extra special to me and my family is this gentleman right here, Commissioner Curtis Adams. I first met him in the mid-'80s But I started following his life in 1988 when he was named to the Hamilton County Commission. And a short time there later, I don't remember the year, but the Adams family opened Right Way Tire, and we started a relation that ended when they closed the business. And he was a regular advertiser, and we just had so many good times. Commissioner, thank you so much for getting up and coming down and joining me this morning. Now, I know you know what a microphone is, but we're videoing this, so you've never been on camera before,
Well,
have you?
Earl, I wouldn't miss it. You've been a lot to us too. And one thing I always remember, Adams Tire Center, old Michael doing the commercials.
We started that as just, you know, a novelty. And I think one morning I just picked up the phone and I called and says, Michael, tell me about those Cooper tires. Y'all just received a citation, I believe, from Cooper Tire, and you received several citations from Cooper for all your tires you sold.
One of the biggest honors we had, the president of Cooper Tire Company came down to honor our boys. They had the highest percent of game one year, and Frank McDonald fixed up a nice luncheon at the Trade Center for us with some big wheels.
Yeah.
And that was a real honor having this president of the company.
But Michael did the commercials, and then Michael got sick, and as Michael wasn't able to do the commercials, I started calling you. And you would do the commercials. Well, as time went on, we started something that I really don't know how we started it, but we would banter back and forth. Maybe we got the idea from Bill Hollander because I would chat with him on Sunday morning. But I think the funniest conversation we ever had was when you hitched a ride on the FedEx plane down to Brazil or somewhere to find us a school superintendent. and I mean, even people like Joe DeCosmo would listen to that. He'd say, you know, I'm sitting here with my wife Rachel, and I'd be eating breakfast, and y'all would come on the air, and we just laugh. It was a good way to start the day. We never rehearsed any of that.
Another thing, we had fun when I was looking for a school superintendent. I was traveling all over the country, you know, to try to find one.
And we were takeoff on the fact that they always would go out of the city to find one, and you took off on that.
The furthest away is the best man.
Yeah, and so you were somewhere in South America. I said, Commissioner, how in the world did you get down there? He said, well, it was either UPS or FedEx. And I called him and said, look, I'll help y'all load the cargo on that plane if I can bum a ride down there. And you said they agreed. So here I was back in the cargo department. You said it's hot, I was sweaty, but said I had to get down here because I heard there was a good man down here to make a good school superintendent. And I asked you, I said, how are you going to get back? He said, well, the same way. He says, I may have to load the plane 2 or 3 times, but says, I'll be back. And said, I'm going to have us a good school superintendent. And I never will forget, you said, he may not speak a lot of English, but he's got 2 doctorate degrees.
Hey, another thing, I would be running with somebody, the Erlanger board. Something real hot. Where are you, Kirsten? I'm going over the Market Street Bridge with the Erlanger board. We were running this morning. And I just make up something, you know. It sounds so real, didn't it?
Yeah, you would run a lot with Maybelle Hurley because she was always involved in stuff. You would run a lot with Gene Roberts, and of course Dalton Roberts and Tom Winston, the president of Erlanger. They were always engaged in a little verbal war. And you'd say, I'm just trying to learn this Tom Winston something. Says he knows a lot about hospitals, but I'm trying to teach him how to get along with Dalton Roberts. And somebody called one time from the hospital and wanted a tape of that. I said, we don't record these things. It's just off the wall. And Ben Cagle like this. What was it about, you've been over there to speak to the Marion County Cockfighters Association, and when I called you, it was a raid, and when I called you, you says, I'm up in the top of this big oak tree, and the sheriff doesn't know I'm up here, but I thought I'd call you and tell you that's where I was. And he was up in this big oak tree, and I'd say, well, did you get to speak to the Marion County Cockfighters Association? You said, well, I got about halfway through my speech, and the sheriff come in there and raided the place, and I took out the back door, and I saw this big tree, so I climbed this tree, and I'm up here till all of them leave down there. Said, wouldn't it be funny if the Free Press had this headline, you know, Commissioner Adams arrested in a cockfight raid?
That would have been good if we'd had to practice it, you know.
Yeah. But it was all extemporaneous, and we had so much fun. We really did.
Now, if you could spell that word, I wouldn't have been qualified to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
What'd you say?
Extemporaneous.
See how these big words?
I can't spell that word. And of course, you always would come. Let's see, you and Bobby Wood and Ron Littlefield and John Lively probably were on my talk shows more than anybody else. And somebody asked me one time, says, how come you invite them? I said, well, it's not that they're that smart, but they can talk. And I was kidding, of course, but every time I would invite you, I can't remember a single time that you turned me down. Ron Littlefield was the same way. Ron was first the Public Works Commissioner, later on the mayor, and every time I invited him, he was there. John Lively, a city councilman, he was always there. And of course, Bobby Wood would come. Bobby was over in the legislature, and I'd say, Bobby, I need you to update us on what's going on in Nashville.
Politicians don't understand that. Most of them don't. They dodge everybody. They go out that back door when they say the press and the commission. They'll go out that back door. I mean, and they don't understand that you're supposed to talk about it.
And I remember we'd be doing some controversial shows, and they would just eat you alive, Curtis. I mean, there would be 25 or 30 people give you a hard time.
And I loved it.
And you loved it. And about 28 minutes after 10, before we ended the show, you'd say, well, Earl, I really enjoyed this. Says, you invite me back any time. And I scratched my head and I thought, this man wants to come back and be on the radio so all these listeners can call him up and complain about
that
something.
Sunday morning program was really popular, wasn't it?
Sunday morning was
Sound off.
Sound Off.
Sunday morning.
You know how that program got started? I came out of the Army, and when I came out of the Army in '73, at the end of '73, Bill Nash put me back on Sunday mornings, and we were playing music, and we were we had a lot of church programs, and in February, Bill Nash came to me and he said, you know, we got this so-called energy crunch. I want you to go on the air and I want you to ask people what they think of President Nixon lowering the speed limit to 55 and President Nixon rolling the clocks forward and putting all of us on daylight savings time. Just ask people what they think of that. I said, Bill, I've never done a talk show before. He said, you're about to learn. So that Sunday, we went on the air. It was 9 o'clock or so, and stayed on the air until time for Ben Hayden, First Presbyterian Church, at 11. And we had 3 lines. They rang continuously that entire time, and some very intelligent calls. So Monday morning, Bill called me in the office and said, come here, Earl, come here. He said, you did a good job yesterday. He said, we're going to start a talk show on Sunday morning. He said, I need you to come up with a name. And I, off the top of my head, I said, Sound Off, because WSB in Atlanta was doing Sound Off. Sound Off it'll be. He said, all right. I said, now what do you want me to talk about this week? He said, before the week's over, I'll give you some topics. He said, don't worry about it. I'll give you some topics. So he came up with something, and we started Sound Off, and the program ran for 31 years on the air. And we had anybody and everybody on that show. Well, most of the time we were on FM, and with a 100,000 watt FM station, why, it would go 100, 120 miles around Chattanooga. So we would get into South Knoxville and over into Manchester and all in the North Carolina area over there, western North Carolina, and down to North Atlanta, and cover a lot of Alabama. So we could talk about a variety of topics. And I remember the hottest topic we probably covered was when they started talking about building the aquarium. And I had a lot of naysayers in the audience, don't you remember? They would call in and they didn't like the idea of the aquarium. I guess this is the last hour of my full-time broadcast career, as I said earlier. Why, we'll be continuing our Sunday morning show, 2 hours on Sunday morning, the Hey Earl Gospel Show. I've been playing gospel music on Sunday morning, I guess, since 1965, since I went to work at WDOD. Not continuously, but on and off of many of those years. We've had a gospel show, and Tom asked me if I would continue to do that, and I told him that I would for a while. I don't know how long. We'll just see which way the Lord leads. But I actually got interested in radio when I was a kid. And, you know, it's ironic that Ben Cagle is here with me, because it was his uncle who influenced me, and that was Mr. Wayne Smith. Wayne was Luther's first engineer, I believe. Later, Wayne Smith went into the car business at Trotter, and Wayne was a good friend, because we had a program from First Church of the Nazarene on Sunday evening, and we would tape it at 6 o'clock, and it played back on WDOD at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, sometime in the evening. And I would meet Merrill Parker, who is really my mentor. I would meet him on Willow Street there and help carry in the Magnacord, and he had an amplifier, and he had 4 microphones. And eventually, as an 8 or 9 year old, I was able to set up those microphones in the church. And I never will forget, Wayne came up to me one time and he said, Earl, don't you get into Mr. Parker's way. and Merrill Parker responded and says, he knows more about this equipment than I do. But I was so interested back as an elementary school kid in radio. Well, I continued to be interested in radio because I would go down to the public library when I was at North Chattanooga Junior High School, and I'd like to go to the public library and do projects because they just had more books and more resources. Not that I was all that smart, but it was just an opportunity to, well, it was an opportunity to go downtown by myself, really. So I would go to the library and do projects. Well, I would walk back down Macaulay Avenue to the bus stop, and at that time WDOD's studio was there in the Interstate complex. Interstate had bought WDOD from Norman Thomas and Earl Winger, and I would stop in there. Well, those guys weren't too friendly, and I would go on down to WDXB. Their studios were in the Dome building, and I remember one day Lloyd Payne, he did his program from a wheelchair, and he says, well, you come on back and I'll let you stand here and watch me for a few minutes, but they don't like visitors here at the station. Well, I went over to, I guess it was either WAGC or WMOC or WOGA, whatever their call letters were there in the Hotel Patton, and those guys weren't too friendly either. But I found a home at WAPO. When Gus Chamberlain, who was a great sportscaster, when he found out that my dad was Charles Freudenberg, they went to Baylor School together. So we struck up a friendship. One day my dad called Gus and says, I don't know, my son's crazy, but he wants to be in the radio. Gus says, I know. Said, just send him on down here and we'll find a place and we'll find something for him to do. So I hung around. I guess you might say I was an intern. And Peanut Faircloth was doing the mornings then, and Gus was doing the afternoon. Ray White, some of you remember Ray White. He was on TV, and Ray, that was where Ray got, I don't know whether that was his first broadcasting job, but I know that he worked there at WAPO also. And then Dean Wickersham came in later on, and Frank Hubbs was the operations manager. And there's been some pictures of Frank Hubbs on Facebook, and we've saved those because Frank really meant a lot to me. And I can't forget little Irwin O'Connor. Irwin was one that was working in the background a little bit, and Irwin later on went to Channel 9. But these folks were all good to me. I guess it was because I would go get Gus, let's see, we had restaurants downtown. Millard Reese Cafe was up there. Well, I'd go up there and get them sandwiches and stuff. And they didn't have a coffee pot, just like we don't have a coffee pot here this morning, and commissioners already laid me low on that. But anyway, I'd go up there and get coffee for them at the Crystal or the Quickie or someplace like that. And I would take the coffee in, and I guess that's why they really put up with me. So one day Mr. Hubbs came and he said, we are going to give you $5 a week if you want to file records. I said, sure. I wanted to do anything. And he said, also, Gus needs some help. He gets the Lookouts games on that big ticker machine back there in one studio, but he does the actual broadcast in another studio. Now, I think Larry Ward travels with the Lookouts, and they have phones and everything that they do the games from, out of the city. But back then, it came in over a ticker machine. So I would tear the Lookouts games, I would tear inning by inning off and take it to Gus in the other room, and I would help him with the Lookout scores. Gus was one of the best sportscasters I believe I ever did hear. I mean, he would be doing an away game, and all of a sudden he'd say, there's Charlie Nicholson down there on the first base side. Charlie's a big Lookouts fan. Boy, I'm glad he made it down to Birmingham today. Or Frank Moore, who was the postmaster here in Chattanooga. Frank was a big Lookouts fan, and I don't know too many Lookouts games that Frank missed while his health was good. Or he'd say, there is Frank Moore down there on the third base side. I think he's gone down to get him a Coca-Cola or something, and maybe a hot dog. I mean, he would let you feel like you were at the stadium when he did those ball games. I just loved working with Gus Chamberlain. Well, 3 years there at WAPO, I did just about anything. I typed program logs. Ben knows what those are. I wrote commercials. Boy, my spelling was awful. I even got to fill in the control room some, and maybe make a station break every now and then. But toward May of '65, WAPO, it was rumored that they were going to be selling to Martin Theaters. So I figured, this is it. It's all over. I will never be in radio again. Well, somebody came in and said, Gene somebody over at WDOD is leaving, going back somewhere out Midwest, and said there's a job open. I said, my dad knows Ernie Feggins. I mean, they all were close in North Chattanooga. So I said, Dad, would you call Ernie and see if he might talk to me about that job? So Dad second time, helped me out, called Ernie Figgins. He said, yeah, Charles, send him over here and we'll talk to him. I walked through the door at WDOD on Baylor School Road, and the manager's office was to the right. They didn't have their extension at that time. But Ernie saw me as I came in the door. He said, Earl, when did you want to start? Well, I had not even had an interview yet. And really, I wasn't too good at talking. So he said, when do you want to start? I said, well, we're fixing to go. We were graduating from high school that day. That was the day Ben and I walked across the stage together. We were graduating from high school, and we were planning a little vacation. But I said, Ernie, I said, this was a Thursday, I think. I said, we will be back a week from Saturday. He says, be here at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. He said, go downstairs, fill out your paperwork with Gene Lando. He was the chief engineer. So I went to the basement. You remember the basement, Ben, and filled out the paperwork. Well, Gene says, we have a lot of power outages over here, and you need to learn how to use the generator. Says, come on back here and I'll show you. So he opened the back door, opened the generator room, and I guess this was my first welcome to WDOD, because there was a big old rattlesnake that was coiled up right there in front of the generator. Lando, in his voice, said, step back. Like Gene didn't have a powerful voice, he says, give me that music stand. There was an old music stand that was sitting there by the door, and he took that music stand and set it right down on top of that rattlesnake and cut the thing into about 6 or 8 pieces. And then he took a broom and he swept it down out of the back of the studio. He says, there'll be some black snakes come out here and they'll need supper after a while. So Eugene had a good sense of humor. But that was the beginning of my working at WDOD. Oh, I got to tell you this story about WAPO. We were down there. It was in the basement of the Reed House. And as all of our old timers know, all of the famous people would either stay at the Hotel Patton or the Reed House. And we got a lot of traffic coming through the Reed House, people that would spend the night and then they would go on to their next whatever. Well, one evening, there were 2 little red lights there in the control room, and those red lights came on, and that indicated that the door was opening. So I opened the control room door, and I went out into the hall, and there was this very familiar face, rather small lady, but I knew who she was, but I just, couldn't place her right off. And the first thing she says, I'm down ashore, and I just want to come into the radio station and thank you folks for playing my records. I believe somebody had played Buttons and Bows or some of her songs earlier in the day. I said, come on in, Miss Shore. I said, these guys don't want to put you on the... No. I'm staying here in the Reed House tonight. Don't want people to know that I'm in town and be passing on through and going down to Atlanta, somewhere south of here. But I'm spending the night here. I saw your sign at the top of the stairs, and I just wanted to stop and say thank you for playing our records. I said, well, you want to meet the other staff here. So I brought her in the control room, and everybody that was there, they came into the control room. And I never will forget, she put a kiss on all of her cheeks. And I didn't take a bath on that face for a month, I guess. But Dinah Shore, what a pleasant interview. Then, a few weeks after I started at WDOD, I worked Saturday and Sunday. Started at 5 o'clock in the morning and worked till 6 o'clock. Very long days, but we had a lot of network shows and things like that, so it wasn't all continuous music. But Saturday afternoon, from about 1 o'clock until 6 o'clock, I was playing country music with just 5 minutes of news on the hour. So, middle of the afternoon, somebody pecks on the door, and I go out there, and it's this man with this beautiful young lady. I mean, she was gorgeous, and she had hair down to there. And I opened the door, and I says, can I help you? She says, I'm Crystal Gale, and I want to give you a copy of my new record. I said, come on in. So I pulled a chair up there to the console, and I started interviewing her. And she was saying, yes, sir, and no, sir. And, she might have been a little bit older than me. I don't know. And what she didn't realize is I was more nervous than she was. But that was my first exposure to doing interviews to some famous person. And going into the Army, after I worked 5 or 6 years at WDOD, doing remotes, Curtis, I believe we must have done a remote broadcast up and down Rossville Boulevard every Saturday afternoon, and we'd do one at one car lot, and we'd do real well for that merchant, and then somebody down the street would call, and they would want us to come down and sell cars for them, and then the other one would call and want us to come back. But we worked Rossville Boulevard. I mean, that was a haven for remote broadcast back between 65 and 70, and people like Ray Hobbs and Hoyt Cameron and Tom Hogue and people like that were at the station, and of course they did the broadcast most of the time. I just went out and set up the equipment. Every now and then they'd let me do some talking, but it was a lot of fun. But in 1970 I started to get the notices from the draft board, and I didn't know exactly what to do. And this is where that God just put everything in place in my life for the next 3 years, and I give him credit, because I couldn't have worked this out if I'd planned it. But I went down to the draft board. Rose Mendock and Donna Lyons. Donna's still alive today. She may be listening right now, but they told me, said, well, President Nixon's fixing to have this lottery, and everybody's name is going to be put in a big jug, and everybody will have a number according to your birthday. Well, I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday night, but mine was 116. You know, that's not that far from 0, and I knew that eventually I would get drafted. So I went and saw the Army recruiter, and I signed up, and I said, what's the chances of me getting into military radio? Oh, I don't know whether you'll be able to get into that or not, but we can get you into a secretarial job, 71 Bravo, and that's sitting there typing logs and doing things like that. So I said, okay. So to keep from going to the draft, I signed up for 3 years and went to Atlanta, then to Fort Jackson, and I remember we were in basic training, and the senior field leader came out and said, we need a volunteer to type. The first sergeant needs a typist. I wasn't too good, Curtis. I mean, I did a lot of strikeovers, but I raised my hand. I said, you know, if this is moving typewriters from one building to another, it's better than going out in the field and playing war games. So I volunteered and went into the ordering room, and that's where I stayed for several months. I turned out to be a pretty good typist. In fact, the first sergeant, I redid a lot of his paperwork and everything, and he got recognized by the battalion commander several times. So, you know, I made a good friend there and had a pretty good job. But that summer, I got orders for Vietnam. So Julie was with me, Amy had been born, and we were living downtown on the economy of Columbia, South Carolina. So we packed up, we moved home, and my aunt said, Julie, you can stay with me, you know, until Earl gets situated at his new duty station. Well, that was Vietnam, so I figured, well, you know, it may be a while before I'm back home. So I went to Oakland, California. That was the transfer station. And it was a Sunday night. Checked in, they assigned us our bunks about middle of the week. If nothing else, the trip to Oakland, California was worth the visit to who I got to meet. About the middle of the week, the sergeant came in and says, we're getting a bus up this evening. We're going to go see the Oakland A's play. And I said, well, I ain't got anything else to do, so I got on the bus and went to see the Oakland A's play. Oakland A's, excuse me. We got off the bus and we went into this big room there at the stadium. And this door opened, and who was it but Gene Autry? And he comes in and he shakes 35 GI's hands, you know, exchange pleasantries, but he came to me and I was wearing my name tag, Freudenberg. He said, Freudenberg. I said, Mr. Austry, you got the correct pronunciation. That's the way they say the name in Germany. So anyway, he says, thank you for your service, but that was the highlight really of that trip to Oakland, California, of getting to meet Gene Autry. Well, the next day they said, formation at 3 o'clock. Okay, this is it, man. They're going to tell me when I'm going to get on the big bird and go to Saigon. So we had formation, and the first sergeant got up. I don't think I can do an imitation, Curtis, of the way he sounded, but he got up, he says, President Nixon, he was singing it halfway. President Nixon, thank you, man, for your service to your country. The following enlisted men are being diverted to Frankfurt, Germany. Wow. They didn't call any names out yet, so I figured, well, there's still a chance, you know, that I might be going to Saigon, Vietnam. Well, F came up pretty quick. And I said, thank you, Lord. So I got over in the formation. They asked, anybody want to go to finance to get some money? You need some money. I had a visa in my back pocket, and I knew that would buy me a plane ticket back to Chattanooga. Had a few days leave. So I returned to Chattanooga, took my leave, and then went to Fort Dix and eventually ended up in Germany. Well, we took the train, had a train ride from Frankfurt to Heidelberg, and I spent a few days in Heidelberg. Curtis, I walked into this sergeant's office, and I handed him a little packet that I'd prepared. It had everything you wanted to know about Earl and then some, and it had my job resume, which was WDOD, WAPO, 7 years experience in radio. And before I'd left for the Army, Bill Nash had named me program director. That's so he could get me off the clock and not have to pay me by the hour. He just paid me by salary, and worked me more hours. Just a little touch of humor there, very little. But anyway, the sergeant looked at my resume. He took my resume and he looked at it and he radio, 7 years experience. Says, just a minute. He picks up the telephone and he calls a warrant officer, Mr. Moore in Frankfurt, Germany, and it was AFM. He said, Mr. Moore said, I've got a young man down here that's got 7 years broadcast experience, and I think you might be able to use him. And Mr. Moore says, well, get him up here as fast as you can. If we can't use him on the air, we'll use him in the office. So the sergeant calls down to the colonel and said, Colonel, are you using your sedan? He said, no, my driver's just cleaned it up and washed it. Oh, wow. They're going to take me in the colonel's car back up to Frankfurt. So I got in the car with my duffel bag, the hour and 15-minute ride back up to Frankfurt. And I know when we were pulling in the parking lot, I looked up and I saw the American Forces Network. And I just was almost speechless. I said, Lord, am I going to get to serve the rest of my time in the Army here? Well, I walked in the door, and there's this sergeant that greeted me. And he said, soldier, welcome to AFN. I said, thank you, Sergeant. And he reached in his desk drawer, and he pulled out a stack of papers, so maybe 3/4 of an inch thick, and handed it to me. He said, I want you to go back there. He said, the engineer will give you a tape. I want you to cut me a resume. And I looked at that thing, and it was Tchaikovsky and Brahms and Schubert or whatever his name was, all of the classical composers. I handed him back the paper. I said, Sergeant, I'm from Tennessee. I says, it's Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton and Hank Williams and Roy Acuff. He burst into laughing. He just started, laughing real hard. And I thought, what did I say wrong? He said, I'm from Kingsport, and I just love to mess with other boys from Tennessee. So we developed a pretty good friendship there. And he said, seriously, he said, our guy that does the morning show, Town and Country, is rotating back to the States on Friday. Now, this was a Tuesday. He said, he's rotating back to the States on Friday. He said, you will start doing his program next Monday. They hadn't heard my tape or anything. I thought to myself, how in the world did they know how I sounded? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I went back to the studio and I recorded a tape. We had a big library there and picked 18 to 20 songs and did a tape. And I started the program on Monday morning, and it aired from 5 to 6 every morning. Well, Reveille in Germany is 4:30. So here I am, a little old boy from Chattanooga. I picked Floyd Kramer's Chattanooga Choo Choo, by the way, as my theme song, and that was the song that I came on the air. But here I am, a little old southern boy from Chattanooga with an accent, and all these other guys have these Midwestern accents. And I was doing the morning show, all of a sudden waking up Europe. And plus all of the GIs and their families, you had about 21 million people that could hear the station. Berlin, Munich, Stuttgart, Bremerhaven, and we even had listeners in England. So I thought, man, what the Lord has really allowed me to do. And we stayed there until we came home, then went back to WDOD and spent a lot of time. Oh, I got to tell you my Lee Robertson story. At one time, Highland Park Baptist Church and Tennessee Temple Schools was the biggest advertiser on WDOD. And of course, Dr. Robertson started Gospel Dynamite on WDOD, I believe it was 1942. They moved the program to WAPO sometime in the mid-50s because Mr. Winger and Mr. Thomas said, well, we're going to play music that hour and we're going to compete with Luther. Winger later said, we went downhill, we never should have made that move, but Gospel Dynamite and Radio Revival with T. Perry Brandon went over to WAPO. Well, WAPO made changes. So the program goes back to WDOD. So we had Gospel Dynamite in the morning at 8:30. Well, the morning announcer was sick, and they had me to come in and substitute. So I'd been putting Gospel Dynamite on the air on Saturdays and, always did it right. But this morning, I never will forget, it was a Buck Owens record. I can't remember what it was, Tiger by the Tail or something like that. And I'm just sitting here enjoying that Buck Owens record, and it rolls past 8:30. And at 8:32, I make the station break, do the intro, and Gospel Dynamite comes on the air. Well, I take them off at 9 o'clock, and the phone rings. You do Lee Robertson's imitation, Curtis, better than I can, but he says, Lee Robertson, Highland Park Baptist Church. What time is it? And I said, Dr. Robertson, it's just a few seconds after 9 o'clock. He said, well, first of all, he asked who was speaking, and I told him my name. And then he asked the time, and he said, do you know what time we start Gospel Dynamite? And I said, 8:30. He said, do you know what time that you brought me on the air this morning? I said, Dr. Robertson, I guess we were a couple of minutes late. He said, we don't start Gospel Dynamite at 29 minutes after the hour. We don't start at 8:32. We start at 8:30. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. Does this need to go any further? No, sir. No, sir. It will never happen again. He said, God bless you. Have a good day. So that was my first contact with Dr. Lee Robertson. In 1974, I guess it was, I needed a raise, and people that have been in radio for any amount of time know that to get a raise, you go to another station. That's usually the way you get a raise, and it's that way in other professions also. So at WDOD, I needed a raise and couldn't get a raise. Well, Happy Howard Huddleston, everybody knows Happy Howard. He was the operations manager at WDEF, and he called me. He says, I got a night job for you. So I went down there and I worked about 5 weeks. Well, I got to know Jolly Charlie real well. I would take the thermos in and we would have coffee in the evening, 6 to 7 o'clock, and then I went to work at 7 o'clock. Well, Friday night was Halloween, and I went home, and I like to listen to my police scanner. And I was listening to the scanner, and I heard him call for the Fast 20, which is an ambulance up to Appian Way, and that's where Jolly Charlie lived. Well, I kept listening. And the dispatcher went back to the officer and says, is that the broadcaster's home? And the officer came back on the radio and said, yes, it is. Well, my ears perked up a whole lot more then. Well, in a few minutes, the officer on the scene says, step that 20 up. For those of you that don't know, a 20 is an ambulance in police language. So the dispatcher says, it's rolling as fast as it could. A short time later, the officer came back and said, he's 449. And that's a DOA. Jolly Charlie had had a massive, massive heart attack. Well, this is 1:30 in the morning. I didn't know what to do. Do I call the station manager? Do I call Luther? Do I call somebody? Well, I got up and Judy says, what's going on? And I related the story to her, and she knew that I couldn't sleep. Well, I waited until 4:15. So I called Luther and I said, Luther, I said, I know you're just getting up, but something terrible has happened. I said, Jolly Charlie had a heart attack this morning about 1 o'clock and passed away. And there was this long pause. And Luther says, Earl, thank you very much. I'm getting ready. I'm on my way to the station. I said, Luther, do you want me to go in and do the sundial program for you? I'll be glad to do that. He said, no, but he said, I appreciate very much. Well, I was listening when Luther came on the air right after the 6 o'clock news, and Luther told me, he said, that was the only time that I ever was emotional on the air and broke down and shed tears. He said, I just couldn't make it through the announcement that Jolly Charlie had passed away. The old boy that I had seen yesterday, that I'd done the 10 to 12 with, and we'd been to lunch. I think they'd been to lunch together maybe down at the Old South the day before. Well, I ended up going in early that morning, about 8 o'clock. I said, Luther, that offer is still good to take over and do your sundial show, the rest of it, if you want me to. 8:30, the news was on, and he said, Earl, is that offer? I said, sure. So Luther left, and I went in and did the last hour and a half of the sundial program, and then ended up working the 10 to 12 slot and the road show. So they moved me in to Jolly Charlie's job. Well, that was really a good job. I was honored that I had been chosen to fill Jolly Charlie's shoes, because he was a very, very popular announcer. It's another story about how he came to Chattanooga, and maybe we can share that sometime. But a little later on down the road, Dale Metter was talking to Bill Nash. And Dale says, Earl will come back to WDOD if you'll just pay him a little bit of money. So they called me up, and Bill Nash was on the line, and he said, I want you to come back to work for me. I said, well, Bill, I'm happy over here. Working with Luther, I'm happy as a pig in slop. So he said, well, would you at least have lunch with us? So I said, well, I'll come over there if you want me to. I'll come over there right now. So I went over there, and I walked in Bill Nash's office door, and he looked at me, so help me, Curtis. He said, name your price. And I thought, well, what should I say? How should I respond? He said, name your price. I named my price, which was about $50 more than what I was making at WDEF. He said, when you want to start? I said, Bill, I've got to think about this. I've got to go home and talk with Julie about this. He said, well, you take 24, 48 hours. So I went back down to WDEF and I told them what had happened, and they said, well, there's no way that we can match that salary. So I ended back up at WDOD, and I started back at WDOD where I'd left off maybe 6-8 months earlier, and stayed there for most of my career. Had a couple of stints in television, but I always liked radio. It was fun. Oh, I told you how Sound Off started, didn't I? Back in February of 1974, I guess it was. And that show ran for a long, long time. That was really a lot of fun. I did get into trouble a couple of times with lawsuits. Some of you may remember the Hawk case. I think that case was in the news, or one of the Hawks was in the news here recently, but they wanted a copy of my program, and I said, give me a subpoena, and it got to Mr. Bayhackon in Charlotte. He called me up, and what are you doing getting me into trouble? But the Lord got me out of that, so everything worked out fine. But that's how I got the name Hey Earl. Parker Smith. Everybody knows Parker Smith. You married him once, I believe, Curtis.
Yeah.
You married him once. He was married half a dozen times, I believe. But anyway, that's just a joke, folks. Parker Smith heard me out in the hall saying that I had to change the name of the talk show from Viewpoint to something else. He says, well, why don't you call it the Hey Earl Show? Because everybody that calls you up says, Hey Earl, Hey Earl, Hey Earl. And the manager, whoever it was at that time, says, I think that's a good idea. So it became the Hey Earl Show, and it stuck. And of course, that's what everybody knows me as today. Somebody asked me the other day, oh, if that's curious, Curtis, said, what's your last name? I said, I've only heard Hey Earl. I told him Freudenberg. Said, well, I can't spell that. I'll just call you Hey Earl. But anyway, that's how I got the name Hey Earl, and it stuck. And we've used it since that particular incident there at the station. I have been honored to receive a lot of awards, and I cherish those awards. And as I was telling Ben and Curtis a few minutes ago, I couldn't open this microphone here if it wasn't for people like these guys and all of you that are out there on the other side of the microphone. We would be nothing. That's not only true of me, but that's true of every broadcaster. Couldn't open the microphone if we didn't have friends and listeners and supporters. And back when I was in commercial radio, many, many advertisers that had faith in me and let me sell their products. And this year I have been honored to be inducted into the Tennessee Hall of Fame, Radio Hall of Fame. And of course, I love Ben Cagle, he knows this, but Ben and Chip Chapman and David Carroll and Gary Mack and Tommy Jett and Jerry Pond were all instrumental in pushing my name forward, and all of the broadcasters selected me for that Hall of Fame. And then, here a few weeks ago, Will Dickerson and the Tri-State Gospel Music Association, they inducted me into their Hall of Fame. So I've had 2 great honors this year. So folks, I'm ready for retirement. It's been a long, long journey, but it's been a good journey. I've got to do everything in broadcasting that I have wanted to do. An announcer, a news director, talk show. For a lot of people didn't realize it, but while I was on WDOD, most of the advertisers, like Right Way Tire, Curtis Adams' place, those were my accounts, and I serviced those accounts and took care of them. And I would go out and I would write down what they wanted me to say on the air on the legal pad, and many, many times I didn't even type it out. I just reread my notes. And so many advertisers throughout Chattanooga placed their confidence in me. I won't begin to name them, because if I did, I would leave somebody out, and every one of them really, really meant a lot to me, and I appreciate their support down through the years. But now comes the time to pull the plug, and on this last day of my career, I must mention Jack Hatcher. I met Jack Hatcher in '74 when I went to WDEF. He was a very unique broadcaster. I didn't know it until I read his obituary that he was stationed at the American Forces Network, where I was stationed in the military. He was there back in the Korean War time and was on AFM Munich, and I didn't know that. I learned that he never talked about his association with the American Forces Network. In fact, in the 60s, it was Luther and Jolly Charlie and Jack Hatcher and Dick Davis, and they were a great team, and they were led by Jerry Lingerfeld, who was the operations manager there at DEF for a while. And of course, WFLI was over here, you know, entertaining the younger folks, but WDEF was the adult station, and they had a great team, and both Hatcher and Dick Davis worked for the American Forces Network. And Dick Davis and I reminisced about that one time, and I never heard that. These guys didn't talk about their time with the American Forces Network, and I'm very, very proud that I was selected to serve with AFM. But Jack Hatcher, one little story about Jack Hatcher. He was responsible for doing the last traffic report on the road show. Charlie will identify with this. So the news car would always be parked in front of the station there in the curve, and Hatcher would rush out. He would call the police department and find out if there were any accidents, and he would rush out to the news car and get in the news car, and Jolly Charlie would say, all right, let's go out to Jack Hatcher now. He's riding around somewhere in traffic, and he's going to give us a report. What you folks didn't know is he was sitting in the parking lot doing that traffic report. I'd say that's pretty innovative, wouldn't you? Nobody ever knew that. And then he would come back in and he would finish up his work and he would go home. And of course, Jack Hatcher would always end his program with a patriotic selection. He played a lot of Anita Bryant, he played the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and the Robert Shaw Chorale, all of these great pop artists that had done patriotic songs. And every day about 5 minutes of 3, he did the midday musical there for many, many years, and he would end his show with a patriotic song. He was very, very patriotic. I really don't know of anybody that's more patriotic than Jack Hatcher. I mean, he just and he was an encyclopedia of songs from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. I mean, if you wanted to know who recorded a song like, well, I can't think of anything right now. Maybe a Nat King Cole song. If you wanted to know the name of it, Hatcher would know it. Or a Glenn Miller song. All the old pop music from that particular era. Jack Hatcher knew who the artist was, and a lot of times he knew what year that the record was made. And I mean, he was just a great resource for some of the older music. And you know, he used a lot of that information and a lot of that trivia when he did his programs. And I just had to mention Jack after reading his obituary yesterday. He's going to be buried out at Forest Hill Cemetery. I think it's a private service, but we sure had a lot of good times with Jack Hatcher. Both of us lived in Red Bank. He lived on Morrison Springs Road, and I lived on Newberry Streets. And he would ride home with me sometime, and he wanted just to ride to my house because he would walk the rest of the way. In fact, I was coming into work one morning on Dayton Boulevard, and it was right there along White Oak, and I stopped. I said, "Jack, you want to ride?" No. I'm gonna walk down 3300 South Broad Street. Said, "I'll make it by 12 o'clock. That's when I'm supposed to go on the air." And he walked. He said that was my daily exercise of getting out and walking. So we had lots of good experiences with those broadcasters. Fortunate or unfortunate, I've worked with some of the best people in the business. There wasn't anybody any better than Lloyd Payne. Lloyd did his program from a wheelchair, and we buried him, I think it was 1976 or 77. Bill Nash was a great friend, one of the best radio managers, and I worked for a lot of them. Bill had a vision. Bill knew what he wanted to do in radio, and he did it. And he would not go against the rate card. He would publish a rate card maybe every year, and if a spot cost $25, that was what you paid. It didn't matter who you were. You might be Coca-Cola, you might be a car dealership, or you could be the mom and pop shop. And you paid what was on the rate card. And Bill had a vision for radio, and Bill knew radio, and I learned so much from him. And of course, we buried Jolly Charlie. I told you about that experience. And here within the last couple of years, it's been a heartbreak for our entire community. You know, I thought Luther would outlive me, and I really did. I mean, it was just habit. Every Tuesday, why we would have lunch with Luther, a Tuesday lunch bunch. And I remember the last Tuesday that I ate with Luther. It was at the Epicurean, and he looked at me, and he says, I'm going to vote for you for the Hall of Fame. And I said, well, thank you, Luther. And his words, something to the effect, says, I'm very proud of your accomplishments in broadcasting. And he said, you have done good. And you know, those words have stuck with me all through the years. Well, we paid our checks and walked outside, and the very last thing that I said to Luther was, so long, old pal, I'll see you next Tuesday. Well, next Tuesday never rolled around because he got sick. He never had the opportunity to do what I had been doing this last hour of sharing with you some of my experiences, because he got sick and went to Memorial Hospital, and that's where he passed away. And all of us in this industry miss Luther beyond words. I mean, Ben Cagle was his manager for a while, and Ben's famous thing with Luther was going in after a rating and kissing him on top of the head, because Luther had great ratings, and Ben knew that that was money for the station, and that was money for Ben, and that was money for Luther, and it was just a great thing. And that was when I would see pictures of Ben kissing Luther, I would say, oh, they got a good ARB back, they got a good rating. But we've all missed Luther, and we all appreciate his service to this community. But you know what? Because of his faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, I'll get to see Luther again someday, and I look forward to that. He made no bones about it. He and his pastor talked quite a bit about his relationship with Jesus. And Luther was good friends with so many people. He shared conversations with me that he had had with George Beverly Shea, Stan Freeberg, the guy that did the Dragnet that so many of you hate, or you love to hate, Christmas Dragnet. He knew Stan Freeberg very, very well. He was friends with some of the singers, and I think one time he told me about spending some time with Nat King Cole. Luther he loved people, and he never saw a stranger. And we were just delighted that we had the opportunity to work with Luther. But Luther and Jolly Charlie, Lloyd Payne, and Bill Nash, and I know that I have left out some of the greatest broadcasters in Chattanooga. Oh, Harry Thornton. I ought to get Ben over here to tell you Harry Thornton stories, because Ben was like Harry Thornton's son. I mean, before Harry Thornton decided to retire, who does he consult with? He consults with Ben Cagle. In fact, I think they took a hunting trip somewhere out to Arkansas, and Harry says, Ben, it's about ready for me to unplug the microphone. And of course, Ben was shocked that he would share that with him before he shared it with his wife Helen. But so many great broadcasters down through the years that this old boy has had the chance to either sit beside, or come on before, or come on after, or introduce. Just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And of course, I must say thank you to Tom Sneed for the last 10 years. We've had a position here at WDYN. I'm proud of my accomplishments at WDYN. I guess this is patting myself on the back, but WDYN used to have one more library of cassette tapes. I mean, how many years, Charlie, of cassette tapes of revivals and chapel services? 40, 50? Well, one year, Ben Cagle and I were over there going through the tapes, and we run across the tape of Ronald Reagan. In fact, we've got a picture of him here in the building of when President Reagan, then Governor Reagan was, I guess he was Governor Reagan, he was at Tennessee Temple University. Well, Ben calls Channel 9, and they get all excited because we found this audio cassette. Well, that was in the Tennessee Temple Library. But long story short, we were able to take a lot of those sermons, and we put them in our computer, we digitized them, and our good friend Brent Smith has put them on the TTU Classic Facebook page. So you can go back and you can hear messages from Dr. Robertson and Dr. Faulkner and a lot of speakers. They're on the TTU Classic Facebook page. If you're not a friend of that, you ought to be a friend of that, folks, because that will give you a lot of history of both TTU and Highland Park Baptist Church. Well, I guess that's just about all that I have to say this morning. I guess it's difficult, and excuse me, but these 53 years have been very, very precious to me. But my family has really endured a lot. We've covered news stories. We've had to work Sunday mornings. We've had to work late at night. I think I probably have worked more Sunday mornings than any other broadcaster in Chattanooga, either there in the studio or in person. And of course, that's hard on your family. there would be birthday parties, or there would be church dinners, or there would be this, or there would be that at night. And I had to go home and go to bed because 2:30 would come here early every morning. And they put up with a lot. And to Julie and Amy and Mark, I say a special thank you. We love each and every one of you folks. And to say that I won't miss this microphone would be not being truthful. But Tom Sneed has graciously allowed us to continue our Sunday morning program, and we got a lot of those in the can, and we'll be doing some fresh ones, and we may even bring some of our friends in gospel music down here to help us with the Sunday morning gospel show. So we'll continue that. I don't know how long, just however the Lord leads. Why, we'll see how that goes, and we'll continue broadcasting on Sunday mornings. Well, I must say a special thank you to somebody that means so much to me, and that's a couple in this area, Jay and Kathleen Craven. Jay has been a supporter of this radio station since I've been here from day one. He sends in a little offering from time to time, he and Kathleen. But when I was at WDOD, why, he did several things for us. He'd come down to the station and listeners would call in, and they would ask requests, and Jay would play those requests. And he was just a very, very dear friend. And Jay, for you and Kathleen, I want to say a big thank you for your support. And Byron Edens is here. Thank you, Byron, for allowing me the opportunity to work here and allowing me to know you. I tell you what, Byron Edens he's a workhorse, and you have really meant a lot. A lot of people don't know what you do, but I'll just sum it up in one sentence: you do everything.
Brother Earl, we appreciate you. We appreciate your years of service at WDYN and in the broadcasting network. And knowing that this was your final broadcast this morning, we wanted to, from Tennessee Temple and Piedmont International University and Temple Baptist Seminary, we wanted to present you a special plaque today, recognizing Hey Earl for 10 years of faithful service at WDYN Radio. We're presenting you a plaque right now. It says you are a 1 in a million, and you will be greatly missed. Brother Earl, we appreciate you and WDYN and what you and Tom and Charlie and all those who have been a part of the broadcasting team here have done to see this radio station continue to grow and to continue to expand and to share the gospel in many different ways. You know, I have been here about as long as you have, brother, because I passed I started into my 11th year in working.
You've been a tremendous assistant to me because you were a resource, and I could ask you things and you would tell me those things, and you say, now look, we can't put this on the air, but you would keep us up to date on what was going on. And the last 4 or 5 or 6 years had been turbulent times, but everything worked out. The Lord put it all together with the merger, and of course it was really something to find out that you sold all of the property, and the school and the church didn't owe one red penny to anybody. And Dr. Robertson would really love that, because he was a stickler for paying bills. So that's a credit to your leadership and to the others who have been in the position of presidency. And I've enjoyed it. I'm still going to have my little Sunday morning program here. So, every now and then people will hear this old raspy voice on the air as I continue to age. But as far as the daily broadcast, why, we're going to be pulling the plug here in just a few minutes. But it has been fun. Thank you for this plaque. Ben, get a picture of this, and Dr. Edens and myself, Dr. Byron Edens. Ben Cagle, he walked across the stage with me on graduation day, June of 1965. And this morning, Chip Chapman had us on his program, and here on my last day, he was on stage with me. So,
amen. That's
what you call a friend.
That's right.
That's what you call a friend. And Ben was successful because he owned radio stations, and I just worked for him. You started to say something?
I was going to say that Dr. Charles Pettit called just a little while ago and said, make sure you tell Hey Earl how much he appreciates you and your broadcasting all over these years and your faithful service. And he sends his regards to you too.
Well, he's a good man, because he likes bluegrass music, and I do too. And when I started back in 1962, we were still playing 78s. 45s were coming in. We had cart machines. We had reel-to-reel tape. You don't even know what a reel-to-reel tape recorder is.
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, you
I
don't
remember
even-
as a little boy,
Oh,
my
you
daddy
don't-
having one of those
You
going
don't know
back
what
there.
but anyway, that's what we used back in that day. Today we have the internet, and it is a big resource, and I'm sure that Tom and the staff here will be developing their internet services as time goes on. And my good friend Bob Campbell, who ran Clark Brothers Furniture for many, many years, he used to always say, keep smiling, and that's what I want to tell you folks this morning. A big thanks for listening, and remember, because he lives, we all can face tomorrow. Jay, take us out of here one more time. Thank you so much.